Hello everybody, it is still Tuesday the 21st of September and I want to make my last video now. Hopefully I got it together now. I got confused there for a while, that's why it took me so long. So I want to talk about the last misdirection that the sheep are being led on by the algorithms. And that is, we have questions, yeah, and the algorithms lead us to answers. And the answers that the algorithms lead us to are those that are favored by the powers that be. Let's say it like that. And we're being led in two different ways. Either we're being led to the point that will lead us to where the powers that be state their own version of how this is, yeah, and as long as the sheep agree with that version that they are putting out and just bleep after them in unison, I mean, that's fine. So they've got those. But then there are those that will keep asking questions, you know. We've awoken to something that's not right here, and we're asking questions, and then they're being led to certain answers. And one of the answers is, you know, about spirituality, about religion, about all of that. Is it leads you to the answer of all that is all philosophy and mysticism, and it is not related to anything, and forget about it. It has, you know, it was made up by some sick mind, and you can safely just forget about it. It's not really related to anything. So, and then if the sheep swallow that and they feel themselves full and content with that answer, so that will solve a lot of problems then, because they will stop at that. Fine. Which again, to my mind, is not the answer. You know, philosophy itself, I actually looked that up because I wasn't quite sure about the spelling, but the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. To say, well, it's just philosophy. It's just the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. Oh, it's just that. Oh, that's okay then. It is the question, spirituality is the question of what is driving us. And that is going beyond what we can explain through nature, through our physical bodies. There's obviously stuff that is driving us and that will create behavior in us and create desires and will create outcomes, which is obviously the need for food, the need for shelter, the need for water, that sort of thing, the desire to procreate. All of those things can be explained on a very, basic level. And you only have to look to the animals, because in that we're no different than them. But we go beyond that. We go way beyond just fulfilling those basic needs as any animal will. And there is other part in nature that does go beyond what is necessary. Yeah, it is not driven the way we are to go far beyond. So, and that is what the question is actually about. It is about what makes us different from the animals. And that is the spiritual question, really. So then how do you answer that question? How do you find knowledge? about that question, what makes us tick beyond the obvious. So I had this thing said to me about Carl Jung, because I was looking into him, and he was probably a Freemason. I wouldn't be at all surprised. And he looked into all these spiritual things, and I knew that. He looked into religion in a big way, into teachings, even went to India to look into those teachings. He looked into alchemy and all those other things, yeah? And it was like, well, that shows you something about Carl Jung. That's the kind of guy he was. He was occult. He was into all this stuff. Now, if you're Carl Jung and you're actually concerning yourself with just this question, how is the human mind functioning? Somebody please find that out. Where do you go for answers? Do you ask the biologist or the medical surgeon? Folks, that has been tried. They've dissected the brain. They haven't found any thoughts in it or any explanation for thoughts. They have found the way of neural pathways, that means, thoughts that you use over and over again will create bigger pathways and you will use them more often and stuff like that. Yeah, they've discovered that, but not what the actual thought. How is the actual thought where does that come from? They did not actually find the actual thought in the brain, and they didn't find it in the heart either. Yeah, they didn't find the desires in the heart when they dissected the heart. So you cannot find the answer in the physical or by physical means. So where do you look? It is a spiritual question. Which again brings me back to where I was talking before, the Gnostics, yeah? And I would say every other religion. The way spiritual knowledge is gained is by the way of revelation. Yeah? You ask the question, not in a materialistic way, but you reach out with your energies, or you reach inside with your energies, whichever way you're going, to receive. That is the spiritual way. And then the answers come back. They are being revealed inside of you, to you. I mean, that is the only, unless you can think of another way, that is how it has always been done. Now, and I think the biggest problem we have, one thing is that, of course, because of Rome, who cut off this process that we were in, and that the early Christians were in, they were branching out into new thoughts and asking from a new perspective, get new answers. So they were no longer asking from the purely Jewish perspective, but from the, a different view of what is they're asking of, something that will give and of which they will receive. So, and they were getting new answers. Now, as I said, Rome cut that whole thing off completely. Yeah, it did not allow this process to continue, which was a spiritual path. Instead, Rome took of that knowledge that they had a very specific part that spoke about one very specific God, and forced everybody to acknowledge that as the only thing that existed out there, yeah, and worship it. I mean, there's not even a communication going on anymore. It is the one that rules over you, and it is the one that gives you, tells you what is what. And that's it. There is nothing else. No branching out. If you branch out, you get burned at the stake. And the only reason why they chose that specific God, so to speak, is because it put them in a good light. It was the reflection of them, and they could portray themselves as godly and as the only ones, which then the Catholic Church took over from that. We are the only ones. And I don't know who's going to be the next only one that has the only truth, but somebody will come. Anyway, so we have a 2,000-year gap, pretty much. I mean, there were secret societies, and there are still secret societies. They probably went on doing what they were doing the entire time, but we never knew what they were doing in the first place, and we still don't know where they're at now. So that's no good to anybody other than themselves. So, and I don't think we can actually reconnect to the early Christians. I mean, the Gnostic text, there is a huge problem with terminology, with the coding, the codes, where they knew what they were talking about, and they used those words. We have no idea what they were talking about, so it would be extremely hard to reconnect to that bit and go on from there, as it should have been, branching out and finding new understanding. But, and here's a but, if we have now, or if we want to spiritually awaken, I think what they did in the end is what needs to be done. Yeah, we need to ask a question, and that question cannot be answered by the rational mind. That's the first thing. Yeah, the rational mind has to be still, so that the answer can come from somewhere else, from wherever. So that is what they did, and that is what we must do. The other thing that I can see, and that is where it then ties back into, what the sheep are being led toward. This is all just imagination. It is mysticism. It's not based on anything. Yeah. What happened, and I think this is where we need to change our focus if we're going back into spiritual works in a big way. And that is, as I said, they tried to find answers. Life, the universe, and everything. And this is the machine that can connect to be given answers. So they were given answers, and they were shown things. And again, we come to Yaldabaoth, yeah? The knowledge of the one that wants to have dominion. And then comes this whole story about him, and the heavens around him, and all the other inhabitants of heaven, and here's where the focus, I think, was skew with. And I don't know how much of that then is imagination, or I mean, what are we interpreting there? Did it come from another place that we know nothing about, and we are interpreting that place? That is like us trying to interpret the Gnostics now. And there's a gap, massive gap in between. That do we even have the understanding of that other place? Does it matter? That's the thing. Are we receiving questions so that we learn about this other place? Or do we, answers that is, or do we receive answers so that we learn something about ourselves? And that is, I think, where they went wrong, because their focus went totally into heaven. And we must understand everything about heaven. Yeah? And even the spiritualists now are doing the same thing. Somebody told them something about dimensions, and they are off. We must know all about out there. No. You must know all about yourself. So with this whole Yaldabaoth thing, the one reason why they could receive that information is because Yaldabaoth is in them, is in us. He is a part of us. Yeah? That will to have dominion is a part of us. And if we were to explore, what this part does, and if we were to see, what it does to us, what we do through it to others, where we use it correctly, where we don't, yeah? That is where our focus should be. The fact that we received that message illuminated in us the knowledge that that part is in us. The illumination is here, inside of us. The illumination is not that there's something out there that is the same as us. Forget it. They are not your problem. You are your problem. We are our problem. So that is where our focus must be. Yeah? And then to build this whole construct of heavens and the beings that inhabit the heavens and God knows what. Forget it. Every revelation that we'll get says something about us and illuminates a part of us. And that's where our focus must be, not out there. Not where the message came from, but what it is illuminating in outside of ourselves. Yeah? And that is where I think they had the focus from. And I said all these constructs of heaven and stuff, how much of that was actually imagination. Because, you receive this and you put it back into heaven. You're not looking at it inside of yourself, but you're putting it straight back to heaven where it came from, a place that you know very little about, next to nothing. And then how much of that was actually then imagination, where they, embellished on the characters and the places they were from and the interactions and stuff, And of course, we are waiting for something to come from there now. Yeah, or we have connected to this heaven or whatever, and they will come down here. And that's actually, I don't think is what's happening. But there is this knowledge inside of us of this will that wants to have dominion. And it is not that they must come from whatever dimension or whatever, or Pleiades or wherever they're coming from, and come here to save us. We must understand what it does in ourselves, because Yaldabaoth can take form. In fact, has taken form. He has multiple clones all over the place at the moment in this world. Not by something coming from out there, but by us becoming that part of ourselves in the fullness. They have become the will to have dominion. How did they become that? By being singled-eyed, by feeding that dog, and that dog exclusively. Yeah? Just give all your energy to that desire to have dominion and stuff like that. And then if you get up there and then you become Pope or whatever, then you can always point to religion saying, this is a godly thing, and he's the only one. Yeah. No. Anyway, that is why I said we must understand ourselves. So then if we go back on the spiritual way and on the way of the Gnostics, and which I would say that is, we cannot see the answer in the materialistic world. Yeah, you can hack the heart to pieces. You can look at it to the cells and smaller than the cells, and you still don't find the desire. Or do the same with the brain. You may find the pathways on which the thought is traveling, but you not find the thought itself. because that is your spiritual body. So, no, it is not all made up and based on nothing. It is actually based on us, because what we received as information is a part of us. Only we then concentrated on the wrong end of it, trying to find out about the heavens and never found out about ourselves. So we are still in darkness about ourselves, and we're creating all manner of nonsense because we do not understand ourselves and we don't know what we're doing. So that is where our focus must be. The works, the way of receiving the knowledge, I think should remain the same. I can't see any other way of doing that. And we've done it for ages. We just use the information that this machine got in the end in a completely wrong way. It should have aided us. It should have told us about us. It should have given us an understanding of us. Yeah? And an understanding of how we become those characters by being in fear all the time, to become the slave. You become the slave through fear, through the feeling you can do nothing. You can become the Lord God that rules over everything else and believing you are the one and you are the only one. Feed that dog and become that, and you will be. So that is how the information should have been used. We should have understood that if we received the information, it showed that was inside of us, and there is where it should have illuminated a knowledge of ourselves. And that's the only place where it can serve us. No good knowing about other dimensions and not understanding yourself. Anyway, that's the last video for today, and I think I'll leave it at that now, and talk to you again sometime. Bye.